The DA share of the national vote, if you look back over previous national and local government elections, has kind of stagnated in the low 20s. And there are a lot of people, not necessarily professional politics watchers, but people who are just interested, who kind of scratch their heads and say, with the ANC in such disarray, and with its share of the national vote going down from a peak of 68% to just over 40% in the most recent general election, why hasn't the DA been able to capitalize and grow its vote into the high 20s, low 30s, perhaps even beyond that? You would think that ANC voters are ripe to be picked off, picked away from the ANC camp, rather than doing what they are quite obviously doing, some of them voting for the EFF or the MKP or Action SA or whoever, but the vast majority of them saying, I'm not going to vote. Why are they not going, I don't like what the ANC is doing to this country. I don't believe that the ANC is going to give me and this country what I and this country need, so I'm going to give the DA a chance. Why are they not doing that? That's the subject of an article co-written by my next guest, political analyst Moeletsi Mbeki, and Marie Harris of Ipsos. Moeletsi, good afternoon.
Afternoon, John.
Is it a simple answer? Black people simply don't trust the DA yet and still see it as being a party of white people most interested in prolonging white interests, or is it more complex than that?
Yeah, it is a lot more complex than that. I think the race issue is there to some extent, but I don't think that is the primary issue. Actually, that the black voter has with the DA. Remember that the black population in South Africa, the so-called black African population, is the most deprived section of the population. Now, it doesn't mean it doesn't have a well-off middle class. It has a big middle class. In fact, the black middle class in South Africa numerically is probably larger than the white middle class today. However, the largest number of the poor and the unemployed are also in the black population. Now, remember, the black population is 80% of our population. I'm talking about purely the African section of it, is 80%. So if you really want to rule South Africa, you have to get their vote. If you don't get their vote, you can never be the government of South Africa. And that is the problem with the DA, is that the DA is not addressing the primary concerns of the black population and of the underprivileged population in general. The single biggest problem of the great majority of the people of South Africa, which is nearly 70% of them, is poverty and unemployment. And the DA does not have economic policies to address poverty and unemployment, especially of the black population.
The DA, Moeletsi, will say they have exactly those policies.
Well, I haven't seen them, but more importantly, the voters, the black voters, haven't seen them. Let me give you an example, which appears in the article Mari and myself wrote. Redeveloping the former Bantustans. What is the DA policy to develop the Bantustan, the welfare of the population in the former Bantustans? Remember, these are 30% of the population of South Africa, and that is the center of poverty in this country. Now, we all know how that happened. But 40%, all the people in the former Bantustans are African, and they are African poor. And they have no jobs in where they come from, whether it's the Eastern Cape, KwaZulu-Natal, Limpopo, whatever. What are the DA's policies of providing jobs for those for those communities. I haven't seen any.
Yeah, look, I'm not a spokesman for the DA, and I'm not a. But okay, well, I'll get somebody from the DA on the radio tomorrow to tell us what their policies are in regard to this.
Please do. I would love to hear.
And I'll send you the audio once the interview has been done, because I mean the DA would argue that they have far-reaching, deep-rooted policies to improve economic growth generally, and a rising tide lifts so many people, and I don't want to speak for them, but we will hear from them tomorrow afternoon then. But if you look at, there are fewer unemployed people in the Western Cape than there are as a percentage of the provincial population than the other 8 provinces. There are fewer unemployed people in the metropolitan area of Cape Town than there are as a percentage of the population of the other metropolitan areas. And the DA would say that is proof that where we govern well. It's a phrase that they often use. And yet that message, if it's an accurate message, is not landing in the ears of black people.
No, first, I think we have to understand what we're talking about. The Western Cape was a preferential employment area for whites and colors during the apartheid era. And the education system of the whites and colors was better off than the education system of the African population. So saying that there's less unemployment, of course the population of the Western Cape is better educated than the population of the rest of the country because of the previous apartheid policies. So that is not addressing the voter for the DA now. If the DA keeps citing figures that are influenced by apartheid planning policies, then it's definitely going to go nowhere.
Yeah, because I don't think the ANC has a policy for the former Bantustans, and the people.
That's why the people have rejected it. That's why the ANC has been rejected by the voters, including many of the voters in the Bantustan. So it's not because the ANC has, after 30 years in power, the voters, and these are the black voters. People forget it's the black voters who have rejected the ANC because it hasn't sorted out their problems, which is poverty and unemployment.
So you think
now the DA is the second largest party.
Look, I'm sure that whoever I speak to from the DA tomorrow is going to tell me that they have very detailed economic policies to improve the lot of the people in the Bantustans. But if that is the case, then you haven't heard of them, and the black voters who are turning against the ANC because the ANC hasn't dealt with the problems of poverty and unemployment are not getting the message. So either the DA has a policy which it is not communicating in a way that is reaching the people who would act on receipt of that information by potentially voting for the DA, or it doesn't have those policies. I don't know which one of those it is, but clearly it must be one of them.
Yes, but what the DA had at its last Congress, which it had recently, it had a resolution to improve its relations with the chiefs in the Bantustans. That was its resolution about Bantustans in the last. But improving relations with the chiefs is not addressing unemployment of these millions of people who live in the former Bantustans. Are you with me?
Yeah, no, I'm listening, and I'm also looking at WhatsApps from listeners. And this is an example of them. Your guest clearly does not read. The DA has policies. The DA is closer to the ANC policy-wise than any other party, funny enough. And so this is what listeners are telling me. The old nugget, blame apartheid for the remarkable performance of the DA. Apartheid has gone. Why haven't the black people educated themselves to be in better positions than they are today? And what policies does MKP have, and so on and so on. But
I'm not talking about MKP or the ANC. Remember, we are talking about what the DA should do to get black people to vote for it. We're not talking about MK Party. We're not talking about EFF. We're not talking about the ANC. We're talking about the DA. The ANC has failed, and the voters have kicked it out. The DA has kept it in power, by the way. If it were not for the DA, the ANC would not be in power. Cyril Ramaphosa was put into power. Mashatile was put into power, and so was, what's her name, the speaker, Togo Didiza. Interestingly, even the premier of Gauteng was put in power by the DA. That's what we're talking about. Is what is it going to do to replace the ANC, which in the eyes of the great majority of South African black voters has failed. So it's no use your callers telling me about what the ANC and MK Party have done. We're talking about the DA. We're not talking about MK Party, the ANC, or even a party.
Moeletsi Mbeki, thank you very much indeed. Putting the cat among the pigeons there. We'll follow up tomorrow and send the audio to Moeletsi and see how he responds to whatever I hear tomorrow.